Hey, what's up guys? This is Apollo Uchiha here, back with the next part of What If Naruto Had Asuras Memories. Now before continuing this part, I would like you to subscribe and leave a like to my channel if you like the content of this channel, and this may be the second last part of this series. So yeah, I just wanted to end this series and finish this as soon as possible. Yeah, that's pretty much it, and without further ado, let's continue with our story. Previously, they come for you, Sayori said to Naruto. Naruto's fist clenched in anger, though his eyes were scrunched shut. A lone tear falling along his cheek betrayed his feelings. Sayori could not find words to console him. When he spoke again, his voice was no longer the same. They murdered my kin, extracted their bijus, and now they're here for me. They only had to get me, but now they destroyed the village too. So many lives lost. I could have stopped this. Naruto muttered, insolence, slowly descending into madness. Hatred seeped into his veins like venom, poisoning his heart, clouding his mind. Sayori was alarmed, for he reminded her of herself, hateful and more like that not vengeful. Naruto, it's my fault, he screamed in despair as he faced the sky. His eyes flew open, revealing red pupils marked with a single vulpine slit. Their vermilion glow mimicked the cursed dojutsu of the Uchiha. Sayori fought her instinct, screaming at her to flee from the terrifying aura he was emitting, and forced herself to hug him. Naruto-kun, you could never have prevented this. Don't blame yourself. If anyone at fault, it would be the Akatsuki. She felt warm tears hit her shoulder as his hatred died down, and understood at that moment the loneliness he must have felt. He was literally the last of his kind, and today Jinchurikis might become existent once and for all. No, she would never let that happen on her watch. The blonde in her arms then broke the hug, fist clenched. I've got a vendetta to carry out, he declared. She allowed a smirk to form on her face in spite of the damning situation. Nothing I'm not used to. Let's go. The Uchiha made to dispel the Garumazo, causing a sudden gasp to escape her lips as she felt agony shoot through her body. The gigantic statue vanished in a plump of smoke and consumed part of her life force. Together with it, Sayori. Naruto caught her before she collapsed to the floor. Her labored breathing making it clear to the Uzumaki that she was in no condition to participate in this fight. Don't worry about me, Sayori said, smiling weakly through the intense pain. Naruto shushed her as he picked her up, bridal style, and deactivated the Musukyojin before returning to the house. As he laid her down, the rest in bed, she murmured, kick their asses for me. Will you? The blonde nodded. I will make sure there's nothing left of them after I'm done. Before he finished his sentence, though, the Uchiha stopped responding as the strain placed upon her by summoning the life-absorbing statue had finally robbed her of her consciousness. With that, he swiftly exited the house, ensuring the compound safely barrier were in place to protect his wife, or future wife. Epicenter of Shinra Tensei, Konohagakure had been transformed into a wasteland, its former glory reduced to nothing except what little reminders on its outskirts. Much of its central business district had been totally flattened, and the humongous spherical crater left by the jutsu showed the power of the person he was about to face. On his way, he saw sense of utter death and destruction. Corpses of his fellow villagers were strewn all over the derbies from their former houses, many of which had collapsed from the Shinra Tensei. The thought made his blood boil. His fingernails pressed again into his palms even harder, drawing blood. In the center of the crater stood a group of shinobis cloaked in the signature attire of the Akatsuki. Another familiar face figured them, the fifth Hokage, accompanied by one of her Anbu. Tsunade glared at them. You will pay for this. The Uzumaki descended upon them, alighting with a boom as his feet slammed into the ground. Leave, Tsunade Bachan. You shouldn't have to deal with the likes of such scum personally. Her eyes widened. Naruto? I said leave. He snapped. It was clear in his tone that he wasn't leaving any room for discussion. Fighting while protecting people will be troublesome. The Hokage grimaced reluctantly and let her cat-masked guard take her to the safety. So, you've come on your own accord, one of the men said, who he could sense had just exhausted a large amount of chakra, implying that he was the culprit behind the jutsu that had obliterated his village. Wonderful. Uzumaki Naruto, you saved us the trouble. Behind him stood 5 others, of which all also had orange hair, save one, Even single one of them was adorned with the excellent Rinnegan, immediately making this 100 times harder. The apparent leader raised his hands, gesturing at the landscape around him. Surrender yourself in the name of peace, or no one else will have to die because of your refusal to give up the QB. The Uzumaki gritted his teeth. Peace? Look around you. How does any of this look like peace? Naruto roared. You don't understand. Pain is a part of peace. Without sacrifice, there will be never peace. It seems you have to learn this the hard way, said the leader, his tone changing. With suddenly speed increased, he appeared before the blonde and thrusted a black rod towards his gut. Before it could pierce his skin, Naruto caught it with his right hand, shrouded in orange chakra. The Uzumaki growled and disarmed the leader with a forceful squeeze which shattered the chakra receiver, but not before the man buried his foot into the chest in retaliation. Naruto flipped and skidded to a stop a few meters away, but his opponent gave him no respite, attempting to land on him with a stomp on his feet. He quickly rolled away and recovered with a push-off from a handstand, narrowly avoiding his enemy's low sweep. The shine of metal in distance caught his eye, alerting him to the projectile that was about to be fired at him. With great urgency, he slammed his palms together and erected a defense just as the leader jumped away from the incoming missile launched by the bald Akatsuki member, Mokutan, wood-locking wall. The explosion blasted against the stalwart wooden defense, throwing up a cloud of smoke which filled the air. The ground beneath the bald man burst open, revealing an angry Naruto about to split his skull with the aerial stab of his kunai. Man's cloak was ripped open from the inside, exposing a giant blade which penetrated the blonde. Alas, his skin shimmered before turning into a electric blue as Raiton chakra discharged through the man, frying him and all his metallic body parts. Raiton, Kagebunshin, noted the leader. A high-pitched wiring caught their attention next. From the cover of dust and smoke, a giant Fuma shuriken exposed of Futon chakra sliced through the air at high speeds, expanding as it approached the 6 nucleons. One of the larger men jumped in front of the team, reaching out with his hands. As the recent shuriken struck his hand, a transparent sphere enveloped him, siphoning chakra from the jutsu and dispelling it into a mere smoke. The other members looked in surprise as the dust cleared, revealing an unscratched Naruto, but what caught their attention was the fact that his eyes had orange pigments. The leader narrowed his eyes. We've been had. The large man was now nothing more than a stone statue. The Uzumaki charged at the 5 remaining, noting that the one at the back of the formation had summoned the King of Hell and was in the process of restoring the bald man. So it appears each of the 6 only used one part of the Rinnegan, and as he had expected, whichever one who was the Petrapath would take the bait by throwing a powerful jutsu at them. The only female in the group weaved hand seals, which Naruto recognized as a summoning technique, and slammed her palms on the floor. As he closed the distance between them, the 2 giants rhino burst into existence and slammed towards him. The blonde did not lose speed, crossing his fingers in the signature Shadow Clone's hand seals with extending his sage-enhanced senses to determine the natural frequency of the rhinos. 2 clones appeared and clapped their hands together as they leapt into the air. Sage Arts, Frog Call! They forcefully expelled Senjutsu chakra built up in their throats as immensely powerful sound waves, which oscillated harmonical at the large beast's natural frequency. Energy built up rapidly in their bodies, paralyzed them in their tracks, while the original slipped past them until they finally exploded into chakra smokes from the response. Without warning, one of the members sprung into action, lunging at him with a black rod. As he swiftly parried the weapon with his own kunai, he analyzed the situation. This one must be the Ningendo. The rest had showed their abilities since they wanted him alive. The man currently before him would be useless ninjutsu-wise, from what Sayori had told him about the soul-killing technique possessed by this path. Naruto twisted away from a thrust of the receiver and seized it with his left hand while ramming his kunai down onto the opponent's right hand. Disarming him, the Uzumaki then stabbed the man with the brown rod and smited him across the face with a sharp blow of his kunai, causing him to double over. All eyes were on him, and the man was certainly fast enough to dodge the incoming fist aimed at his head, even in his pain state. What he couldn't see, however, was the tremendous amount of natural energy around it. The air ripped as the massive strike blasted the man towards the king of hell like a rag doll. Beads of sweat rolled down the Uzumaki's head as he proceeded to sprint towards the Nakara path. The woman from earlier dropped in front of him and swung her arms in an arc, hoping to close sign the blonde. The Konohanin quickly dropped to his knee and slid beneath her outstretched arm before recovering to his feet and pushing off as fast as he could. With a high jump, he leapt towards the annoying entity that kept reviving his foes and cocked his fist back as natural energy massed rapidly around it. Kawazu, he was interrupted by an invisible force that wrapped around his ankle, yanking him down towards the floor before he could reach the King of Hell. The natural energy the Uzumaki had gathered dissipated as he slammed into the ground face fist, and the slimy tongue of the hidden chameleon withdrew from his leg. "Sit!" barked the leader coldly as he drove two rods into his legs. With a harsh kick, he flipped the blonde over and stabbed another chakra receiver into his shoulder. He hissed excruciatingly as pain coursing through his muscles. "You will never have him," Naruto muttered. The man cocked his head to the side. "I think not." Glancing at him with his Rinnegan, the agony was amplified hundredfold as his chakra invaded the Uzumaki system. The image of the divine dojutsu bore into his head, branding itself into his mind. "Yield, QB. Never in 1,000 years." Naruto screamed, his body beginning to shake violently. Wisely, the man took a step back. A moment before, a golden shockwave of chakra to match the Shinra Tensei sent him hurtling away, shattering the petrified form of the Gakaido. The rods were ejected from his body, leaving steams to rose from the wounds as they closed up. Naruto stood up closely and slowly, his body shrouded by ancestral chakra like an eternal flame. The members of the Akatsuki recovered quickly to face the new threat posed by their quarry. "Just in time," uttered the Tendo as he flexed his finger, energy returning to his chakra-exhausted body. Chibaku Tensei, a small black mass shot skywards, pulling slabs of rocks in the vicinity as well as the Uzumaki towards it. The rock prison quickly transformed into a sphere as more rubble piled onto its surface, trapping the human touch. "Got him." The surface of the satellite ripped before exploding, its constitute debris falling back to the earth like minor meteors, showering which pelted the flattened village. "I stand corrected," said the Tendo, observing the expanding black orb, which emerged from what was formerly his satellite. Just as suddenly as it had come, the jet black sphere retracted into smaller, denser orbs behind Naruto's back. The levitating Konohanin rocketed towards the Jikoro and his arm summoned a large spike manifesting threateningly from these Gurodama, which airborne. The leader quickly extended his hand towards the Jinchuriki and exerted a gravitational pull on him, Bansho Tanin. The space between the two of them seemed to shorten as the air wrapped in an attempt to drag Naruto away from the Naraka path. The man's purple eyes widened when the Uzumaki exceeded escaping velocity and shot out of his gravitational field. With a wave of his hand, the blonde fired a volley of truth-seeking orbs at the King of Hell. The entity that had just finished restoring the human path was quickly dispelled by its owner before it could be destroyed. Alas, the black orbs found a new target and buried themselves in the chest of the Naraka path. Within moments, he disintegrated as the utter destructive spears expanded rapidly. The Ningendo leapt away as Naruto landed nearby and quickly jumped after him. He extended a chakra claw, seizing the path in midair. The Uzumaki closed the distance and slammed his right hand into his chest, sending the Naraka path crashing into a crater on the ground. Without warning, the spot Naruto had contacted earlier with his palm turned black as 4 trigram appeared on the Ningendo's chest. From it, black lines spurted out with a consistency like ink, forming a sphere around them. The 4 trigram appeared momentarily on the sphere surface before it rapidly expanded to the size of one of the faces on the Hokage rock. Without hesitation, the 3 remaining Akatsuki members got out of range of the spear just in time to avoid everything inside it collapsing, being sucked into the chest of the human path. As it skidded to a stop, the leader raised an eyebrow. "Reverse tetragram sealing, an S-rank Uzumaki Funjutsu that you applied within seconds, and without hand seals either. You truly are a formidable opponent, Uzumaki Naruto." The blonde was even more surprised. The seal was set to activate upon death. How the hell had it activated straight away while he was alive? Unless Naruto closed his eyes and instantly the world became dark, save three flickering blue flames before him. Their chakra signature was exactly the same. How he had not noticed this before. In his range, had he been blinded? If their chakra were to be linked to rivers, the three Akatsuki members were tributaries. The source of this river was somewhere else. If he was right, the puppet before him was mere corpses controlled by the greater power. A high-pitched whirring tore him out of his thoughts, and when its eyes flew open, he was greeted by the sight of a larger chakra-charged shell on the bore of the Shurado's arm cannon. The supercharged projectile sliced through the air quickly towards him, as swift as his will would allow it. Naruto drew all his truth-seeking orbs into a shield in front of him. A bright flash of blue filled the air, followed by a deafening boom. 7 more rockets bombarded the Gurodama's barricade, forcing the Uzumaki to continue taking over. "Last warning, Uzumaki Naruto. One more of this," said the Shurado, pausing the fire of a missile at the Okage Rock. "Will happen." Chakra blasted through the momentum, easily wiping out all the faces in an instant and triggering a landscape. The rock stumbled off the side of the cliff face and crushed the buildings directly below him. No! How dared they destroy his last piece of tangible memory of his father and his adoptive grandfather? How dared they destroy his home? Naruto jumped out of the cover, avoiding the artillery shells, which now flew in an arc towards him. The black shield humid for a moment before reappearing suddenly as separate rods, which penetrated and detonated the munitions before they could hit him. "Corpses should stay dead," roared the blonde just as he disappeared. Immediately, the three were on guard, scanning the ruined land across them for signs of their quarry. They weren't prepared for their angered Jinchuriki to materialize suddenly before the Asura path. His right hand glowed with tremendous glowing golden fire that was even brighter than the cloak which adorned him. It took only a second for Naruto to thrust his fist into the pain's body, which immediately disintegrated upon impact. All matter that was previously behind the Shurado was displaced for kilometers and formed a humongous vacuum. The air surrounding rushed in a breakneck speed, seeking to fill the void. Consequently, the results gale sucked the two paths towards Naruto. Kyoshitsu no Jutsu intoned the animal path, summoning an avian beast, which they jumped on to escape the violent windstorm. The Uzumaki eyes Naruto, his hands across into a hand seal. Tajikange Bonshin no Jutsu. Numerous shadow clones flooded the sky, surrounding the pair, mounted on the giant bird. With a metal command, all 2,000 of the clones converged on with massive Rasengan in their hands. Only 2 words boomed loudly as the assailant flew towards the pass. Shinra Tensei, the air ripped with cross force that all the clones were pushed back and dispelled at once. Even the animal bot and her summon were no exceptions. It seemed that this jutsu was on the same scale as the one that had first torn Konohagakure asunder from whatever remained in the village save the Uzumaki compound was leveled. Amazingly, one person withstood all this and overcome it. One Uzumaki Naruto whipped through the air and reached the epicenter of the Diva path, technique faster than it pushed outwards. The furious Jinchuriki's hand found purchase on the body of the Tendo, where black markings started to crawl all over and paralyze the corpse. Naruto started to stare into the purple eyes which adorned the man. "Make no mistake, Uzumaki. I already have your chakra signature and will hunt you down. I will show you that you don't have to be dead to be in hell." Second later, the powerful jutsu seized its caster, now robbed of his connection to his puppeteer, plunged through the sky. Out of nowhere, dozens of sheets of paper enveloped the body before it could hit the ground. The fatigued blonde had no time to rest with his new threat present to him and quickly traced the source of the chakra which controlled the paper. He found the Konoichi in question somewhere in the distance, a middle-aged woman with blue hair and piercing amber eyes. Most striking of all were the 2 massive wings of paper sprouting from her back, which dwarfed her peptide frame. With a wave of her hand, a fleet of 1,000 paper cranes soared towards him, each one marked with enough explosive tech to destroy a house. Give up, Uzumaki-san. Your sacrifice is necessary to stop all bloodshed in this world for good, came the voice of a woman. You say that, yet you and 7 of your terrorist crew just wiped my entire village off a map. How can I yield the very entity which holds the balance? Spat Naruto as he weaved through hand seals. This ends now. With great concentration, the blonde released an extensive pulse of chakra through the air, casting a Fuinjutsu field which disabled all chakra within its spherical parameter. Every piece of paper explosive tag in the vicinity was rendered useless, and all of the woven paper constructs separated into a loose sheets with no chakra to hold them together. The Uzumaki quickly flew towards the forest where he had located the mastermind behind the corpses, not even bothering to watch as the woman plummeted to her death without the ability to mold chakra for her wings. Western Forest. Naruto screamed as he plunged his fist into a giant tree, feeling it as the bark crashed away. It was revealed to be hollow. Seated on the throne of wooden inside was a man who looked like he had not eaten for days. Though his body appeared weary, his powerful eyes led to Naruto to keep his guard up as he lunged at him. The man leapt out of his seat as the last moment tried before his blonde collapsed it. The younger Uzumaki gave chase, pouncing on the man with a quick punch. Narrowly evading it, the older Uzumaki caught his fist and siphoned chakra from it at a rapid pace. With the revitalization of the chakra of Asura, the man here regenerated its former red hue. Naruto growled, his chakra claw disappearing, and retaliated by ripping his hand out from the forceful grip. A second arm grew out of the older Uzumaki right side and grew a punch. The blonde deflected the second arm to the side before seizing it along with the first right arm. Stepping back quickly, Naruto dropped his body into a kneel sudden and yanked down on his hands, wheeling the redhead through the air before slamming him on the floor. Almost immediately, the older Uzumaki's second right arm transformed into a cannon, forcing Naruto to swiftly push his arm aside as he attempted to blast him with chakra. The stray projectile flew at an adjacent tree and demolished it into smithereens. The blonde stood up and dragged his kinsman into a standing position before reappearing his leg out from under him with a kick. Naruto swung him through the air briefly before letting go and delivering a harsh kick to the abdomen which propelled him in the direction of the village. The blonde rocketed through the air after him, engaging in a brief grappling match. Naruto snagged his hand past the defenses of the old man before thrusting a palm at his face. The blow flipped him over, enabling the younger Uzumaki to initiate a variant of the Kagebyo. Naruto grabbed the leader of the Akatsuki by his ankles and wrapped his legs around his face. With a quick spin, the two were locked in a fatal drop towards the village, with the redhead plunging headfirst. Peregrine Falcon drop. The blonde disengaged just before the older Uzumaki slammed into the rock. Springing away, the latter dislodged himself from the ground while hacking from a persistent cough. The Akatsuki leader drew a long, hard breath. Naruto, you think that you know true peace, he uttered, his labored voice evident as he got up to the kneel. But the truth is, you're foolish for thinking that peace will ever last without the pain of millions as a reminder. He punctured this with a series of coughs. Naruto's eyes narrowed in fury. Don't you dare preach about peace. After what you've done, you have no right to speak about peace. The red-haired man gave a bitter laugh. You say this because you are ignorant of the true nature of peace. You would not have learned about the importance of peace had you not experienced this pain today, and yet you still refuse to do what is necessary for greater good. This is peace? This is massacre of innocents. In the pursuit of your deluded ideals, you'll have to pay for it. For every single life you took, the longevity granted by our lineage will be your curse. Naruto swore, right as placed his hands together in a snake seal. Wood style, crucifix. A large cross fashioned out of rough timber rose from the floor. Do it then. It's merely another life taken in the name of peace. The man said, a smirk on his lips in spite of what was to come. Shut up, Naruto demanded, amassing Mogadan chakra in his right hand. A long whip of interwoven branches materialized in his hand. Strewn across were shards of bones and metals. The Uzumaki began to scourge the older Uzumaki, administering dozens of lashes which shred the flesh of his back and reduced it to an unrecognizable mass of blood and ribbons of tissues. Throughout it, the man let out howls of agonies, so loud that they could be heard all throughout the village who were still alive. Once he was whipped into a near that state, Naruto discarded the tool. The dripping mess which the older Uzumaki had become was unable to stand any further. The searing pain that wrecked his body, rendering him nearly immobile as he collapsed to the floor. Seeing this, Naruto gripped his kinsman by the throat and slammed him against the crucifix he had created. At this point, the leader of the Akatsuki could no longer resist. The jet black rod manifested into his hand of the younger Uzumaki. With a cursory glance, Naruto brought the man's left arm up to the patellum and swiftly drove the sharp implement through his wrist, severing his meridian nerve. The intense pain shot through his arm, eliciting a groan before blood frothed at his mouth. A second rod was buried through his right wrist and into the hardened wood, skewering the older Uzumaki to the crossbow. Blood spilled out of his mouth, gory fashion, but even so, the man gazed at the blonde defiantly with his Rinnegan. The final chakra receiver materialized in his palm as the Jinchuriki plunged the rod throughout his arch of his feet, nailing him to the tips. His consciousness evaporating, his innocence marred by the unnecessary blood on his hand. With the purification complete, Naruto's rage subsided as quickly as it came. What was this emptiness? He was supposed to feel satisfaction. The sudden loss of goal led him to be greatly confused. It did not help that his vision swam with pain from overusing his chakra. The curse of hatred, said Asura with much sadness, perfectly putting a name to the indescribable emotion that his descendant had felt. I'm sorry, Asura-san. I failed you, the blonde whispered and whimpered as he fell to his knees. I let my hatred consume me. Shut up, you worthless piece of shit, growled Kurama. Now is not the time to cry and bitching about how you fucked up. Look around you, all this damage, the villagers half dead. They need someone right now, someone who can help them. And you believe best you're that someone. Harsh as his words were, his Biju was right. Thank you, Kurama. The Uzumaki got into a kneel, his hands forming a reverse ram's heel. Asura warned, Naruto, you sustained the 6-spot sage mode for over 30 minutes, and your chakra is dangerously low. This might not be a good idea. If it's the right thing to do, I truly wish to do this as to be Hokage, to lead my people. Then I have to be prepared to serve, even if it takes my life. For the second time that day, his chakra materialized as a cloak along with its accompanying black orbs. They split up into hundreds of spheres that size of marbles, which spread across what was once the village, seeking out survivors to heal with their yang chakra. Suddenly, Uzumaki coughed up blood before kneeling over and collapsing to the floor with a thud. The roots of his hair began to bleach with the extreme exertion of his reserves, for even what Asura and Kurama offered had been drained to support his enhanced state over such a long duration. The last thing he saw before his eyes was the Goraime Hokage and her Anbu guards rushing over to his fatigued body. Hours later, the white cloth characteristics of medical tent greeted his eyes when they next opened, eliciting a groan as consciousness swept through his system. The only two occupants were the Cadmaster Anbu and Tsunade, who had her glowing hands suspended above his chest. You're awake. She nodded with an even tone. In spite of his condition, he could still sense her emotion. She was clearly troubled and very sick, but was suppressing tears. He couldn't blame her. He was in a sorry state. I thought you were a goner. You're exhausted so much chakra that your hair turned white. Do you know how many chakra pills I had to administer? Chided Tsunade. It was alright. You rather let her get loose in the process of medicine, something she was familiar with, than focus on the bigger picture of what she couldn't administer anymore. A village. He managed a weak grin. Sorry, Ba-chan. The slug Sanin looked so stressed that her own hair might have turned white as well. Naruto, the village is completely gone. And so is the man you left for dead on the cross. We can only assume that Madara imposter took him. From a head count we did, there are only about 5,000 villagers left. Discontinuing the shinobi currently on missions, with no homes left, expect yours. Everyone is left absolutely standard and stranded, and the food supply in the evacuation side will only be able to last us a week. Naruto made to sit up, but winced and clutched his stomach, which was still tender from releasing so much chakra. Rest assured, Your Imperial Highness, I might have a solution, spoke the single Anbu guard. The Uzumaki raised an eyebrow. Sure, they called Tsunade Hime, as she was the granddaughter of the Shorai, but Tenka? Your Imperial Highness was the first. Suddenly, the purple-haired envoy removed her cat mask, something which never did in the presence of anyone but the Hokage alone. Your Imperial Highness, I hereby resign from the service. This shocked the other two in the room, even more than the fact that she had called Tsunade by the title that had long been in disuse. Why now? With all due respect, my lady, I have a higher lord to serve now. The woman replied, Who? The blonde's voice trailed off as it dawned on her. You can't be serious. I should have known. What? A confused Naruto asked. This lowly servant, Uzuki Yugao, pledged her undying alliance to your Imperial Highness, the Crown Prince, the former aide, said with her head down as she knelt at a respectful distance away from him. After a moment of hesitation, Tsunade followed suit. The curdling blue eyes of the prince widened. What the hell was going on? What kind of prince was he? And of which domain for that matter? How in the world did he not know about any of this? A million questions raced through his mind, but he forced himself to calm down. A prince was to behave in a state manner, right? He took a deep breath. Please, Rise, explain what is going on. As you wish, Your Imperial Highness. The Uzumaki clan is descended from the younger son of the Rikodono-sanin, Otsutsuki Asura. With their formidable power and reputation for producing greater leaders, many willingly became subjects of the clan over the years, including other tributary and vassal clans like my own, the Uzuki, a clan of imperial retainers. Eventually, the Empire of Whirlpool, with the Imperial House of Uzumaki at its center, and composed of all the elemental nation, and the world was at peace under the Emperor of all under the heaven. However, during the Warring States period, strife tore the empire apart, with the clans taking sides and breaking out of their tributary status to the empire to form their own nations and ninja villages, with the daimyo and kage leading them. Though they were all nominally subordinates to the Tennon Emperor, this weakened the power of the empire considerably, reducing this real sphere of influence to the village of Uzushio-gakure. The long-standing alliance of the Senju and Uzumaki clans and the marriage of the Shorai Hokage to the Princess Mito did little to stop this. Some villagers decided to band together to destroy the empire at its core, but what they only did was the fragment of it. Many of its members escaped the chaos, including the young princess, Crown Princess Uzumaki Kushina. My clan was tasked by the court to follow the imperial family into Konoha to watch over them, and when the right time came to launch an imperial restoration, we were given strict orders not to speak of or have any reveal of your heritage until you come of age and completed the customary 3 deeds, feats of bravery and courage that have benefited the community. Why is Tsunade not the heir apparent? Naruto asked. She too was a Uzumaki descendant through Uzumaki Mito after all. This is because the Uzushio Empire practiced absolute primogeniate, meaning the eldest child of the reigning dynasty would be the first in the line to the throne. The first common ancestor between your Imperial Highness and Tsunade Hime is the late Tenno Hisai, father of Mito Hime. He had an elder child, another emperor of whom your Imperial Highness is a descendant, rendering Mito Hime's progeny a candent branch of the imperial family. Tsunade Hime is thus formally titled Princess Tsunade of Mito, a Jo princess for the outer court, a second-rank princess by birth based on her proximity to legitimate the line. As mentioned, by tradition, the 3 exist deeds that one must complete to prove themselves before one could be considered for enthronement, which you had just completed. Therefore, as the last surviving member of the main house of Uzumaki, your Imperial Highness is the only legitimate heir to the Maelstrom throne. The Naruto frowned. What empire is there for me to lead anyway? Wasn't it completely destroyed? Not quite, your Imperial Highness. As of now, the village of Uzushio still stands in the eastern oceans, hidden from other villages by powerful seals and barriers. It was rebuilt by the resilient people of Uzushio, and with the technology of seals, I've heard that they advanced far as a society. This is my proposed solution: to move the people of Konohagakure to Uzushio while we rebuild the leaf from the ground up. The Imperial Highness will be crowned as Tennon, and peace will fill the lands of Earth once again. Naruto gave the Hokage a look. She nodded in response. Alright then. It seems that this would be the most expedient solution. How will we get there? My lord, may I suggest informing the Uzushio-gakure to send vessels to the nearest port. Spread the word then. The port of call will be Naminakuni. Get every shinobi on a mission to return as soon as possible. We'll set off by first light in 3 days' time. Ordered the Crown Prince. Yes, your Imperial Highness. Uzumaki compound later that night. figures that you're the crown prince of some long-lost empire," said Sayuri as she sat up in bed. "I mean, why not just add to the long-lost list of the accolades that will blow up your mind even further?" The Uzumaki laughed, running his hand through his ivory hair as he sat down next to her. "Come on, I only wanted to be Hokage." His consort shook her head in mirth. "I don't think you understand, your Imperial Highness. When you ascend to the throne, you'll be the most powerful man in all of the lands. The Kages are merely marquises, and the daimyo are all dukes in the names and eyes of the Son of Heaven." Naruto raised an eyebrow. "How do you know about all of this anyways? In my youth, I was made to study the feudal and peerage system as part of the education in Uchiha clan. I only learned about the empire in theory, though there was never any case study involving the Uchiha Empire. It's as if it was a piece of the past people wanted to keep buried." Naruto nodded. "I see. People had known about my true heritage. I think even more would have been out to get me than just my father's enemies. Fortunately or not, it seems the empire has been mostly forgotten after its destruction, and now it's a matter of reopening the border." Sayuri sighed. "It's not as simple as that. You got to be strategic about this, Naruto-kun. It won't be easy convincing nations which have not been under a foreign sovereign's rule for decades to come under vassalage. We'll have to start with our allies like Nami, Suna, or possibly Kiri first." The future Grand Duke of the Eastern Oceans looked absolutely stressed. The young woman, sensing her husband's anxiety, gently pulled his head into her lap. "I'm sorry." His crystalline eyes started to stare up into her space-black ones, now filled with more warmth than ever. "What for?" "For stressing you out. The road ahead will be uncertain, and what I said probably did not make anything but sound better." Naruto smiled. "It'll take more than that for me to give up, Hime. I see a road to peace ahead. I'll be damned if I don't lead everyone towards it. If it helps, I'll be there for you, every step of the way." As she said those words, she lowered her lips and gave him a kiss on the forehead. She made to pull back, but Naruto's hand shot up and grabbed the back of her head, capturing her lips with his. Instantly, the Uchiha's face flushed a bright red as the unexpected affection. "Thank you, Sayuri." 3 days later, Nami no Kuni. The past 2 days had been a blur. People were struggling to return to their daily lives and recognize themselves. Reorganize themselves, and it didn't help that they had no more houses, so they were all holed up in small tents in a temporary campsite on what was once the land of the village. Those who had families in the capital, mainly civilians, were free to leave and seek shelters. However, many shinobi's clans were stuck in the situation, as most of them had already been rooted to the village since the foundation. The announcement of the crown prince's edict of migration did not go down well with them, but for most they were simply glad that there was a place to go, as the food supply was getting scarce. It was not like they had much of the choice anyways. Under the Hokage's aegis, no one dared to question his authority. Nonetheless, many were happy to hail him as their prince and hero, as he had dealt with the leader of the Akatsuki and a great threat, and did his best to provide relief by giving out all the possessions in his compound. This would probably not be lasted if they knew that the attacker was after the Uzumaki himself. In a sense, he had been indirectly responsible for the attack. The news of his heritage came as a shock to most of the people he knew. None had seen it coming, as the empire was practically unheard for his generation. However, they were glad that it was someone they knew who had the reins, so they just went with the flow with today's Exodus. After crossing the Great Naruto's Bridge into Nami, Naruto and Sayuri decided to pay a visit to Tazuna and his family, along with their returnee consisting of Yugao, Tsunade, Kakashi, Sakura, and Shikamaru. Yugao became their personal servant due to her clan's visage, while Tsunade had to follow the Imperial, as the whole affair constituted part of her job as Hokage. Meanwhile, the rest of the entourage had been hired and handpicked by the couple. Kakashi was in charge of their security, Shikamaru was their advisor, while Sakura was their physician. "The Imperial Highness are here," called Tsunami excitedly as she looked through the peephole before opening the door. She knelt down as they entered with their entourage, just as Tazuna pulled Inari down into the same position. "This is humble family pays its respect to the prince and princess of Uzumaki," greeted the village chief with his head bowed. "Please raise, there is no need for formalities," said Naruto. Sayuri said, "It's been a while, Tazuna-san, but certainly sooner than I had expected." Inari grinned and ran towards her, and soon as he stood up, "One-chan." Immediately, Yugao's hand reached for her katana, but the Uzumaki quickly gestured her to stay her blade. The Uchiha smiled as she hugged the jubilant young boy. Setting him down, she ruffled his hair and asked, "How are things going?" The boy pouted. "There haven't been any bandits around lately for me to kick their asses." Tsunumi's eyes widened at Inari's less than savory words choice. "Please forgive my son. Crude words, my lady." The crown princess waved her hand dismissively. "That's good to hear, Inari-kun. There shouldn't be anyone causing trouble here." And at this point, her voice dropped into a whisper that only the boy could hear. "Or I'll kick their asses too." The boy broke into peals of laughter before shutting up when Sayori placed a finger onto his upturned lips. Meanwhile, Naruto sat down on the sofa as Tauzen served 2 teacups. "A prepared port upon receiving your Imperial Highness's letter 2 days ago. It closes to all ships, saves yours, so the boarding should not be a problem," said the chief. Naruto glared in mock anger. "What did I say about the formalities, Tazuna-san? Please just call me by my name." "I wouldn't dare do that to the son of heaven," came Tazuna's swift reply. Tatsumaki sighed. "Things seem to be so impersonal when titles are involved. Nonetheless, I'm just thank you for your service rendered. I don't doubt that today port closure would have affected Nami's business severely. Rest assured, the Empire will compensate the country heavily for today." "Country?" Tazuna repeated in confusion. Sayori sat down, cup of after a sip. "That's right. The crown prince intended to ennoble and enifove your family as a reward of helping the people of Konohagakure. As soon as His Imperial Highness ascend to the Maelstrom throne, you will be evaluated to the rank of Count." The man and his daughter gasped and immediately tried to kneel but were stopped as the imperial couple grabbed them before they could. "This lowly servant gives your Imperial Highness great thanks," cried Tazuna. The exasperated violet-haired prince was about to swear, but held himself back due to the presence of the entourage visiting with him. "Tazuna-san, this was also because of the shelter you afforded my dear consort while she was out of the Konoha for this too. I give you my thanks." "Nisan, can I ask you a question?" "Fire away," Naruto said. "Why is your hair white?" Naruto smiled. "Let's just put it this way. A really powerful bad guy got us into a huge mess. While fighting him, the amount of power I had to use bleached my hair. Oh, forgive me, my lord," for he knows not what to ask. The worried Tazunimi pleaded hastily. "It's fine, Tazunimi-san. I was never one for formalities," Naruto assured. As he stood up, Sayori followed him. "Once again, on behalf of my people, I thank you for the hospitality till we meet again, Tazuna-san." The man bowed as his daughter did as well. The imperial couple left their house. The humble family sends off their Imperial Highnesses. Port of Nami. The town was flooded with Konoha immigrants, so much that the Naruto's entourage could only pass through the town square after much difficulty. In the process, the returnee came across the marble statue of the prince. Quite frankly, Naruto was surprised at how much it resembled his old self. It did not, however, do justice to call his training. He sighed internally. When he ascended to throne, he would have to send a missive to get it replaced. "Tenka, yes? There's a small fleet on the horizon," Yugao pointed out. The white-haired prince squinted at the dots in distance, which was obscured by the bright sunlight of the afternoon sky sparkling at the water. "You're right, I see it, but it seems like a little small, don't you think?" It was true. For vessels meant to transport the whole population of Konoha, Naruto had expected ships the size of Academy building at the very least. What was now fast approaching the shore was 5 watercrafts, what could fit approximately 10 people each. "Did you not specify the number of people in the ferry today?" Naruto asked. The retainer quickly fell to her knees. "I wouldn't dare, your Imperial Highness. I did exactly as you requested. The yard is vesseled." "Then can you explain what is going on?" Sayori's eye glowed a faint red in the afternoon light. At the worst, my prince, it seems there are more than meets the eye. The Tsuhamaki raised an eyebrow, signaling for Yugao to raise as the watercrafts neared the pier. A muscular man in his 40s disembarked from the flagship, marked by a prominent white flag with a red spiral on the imperial clan in the center and an anchor behind it. He was dressed in white and grey fatigues, and on his left arm there was a symbol of band emblazoned with the same symbol. The entourage surrounded Naruto and Sayori made it obvious that they were the royals in question, and so the man knelt down, mirrored by every shinobi on board the fleet. His humble subject, the admiral of the Uzushiho Armada, pays respect to the crown prince and princess of Uzushiho. "Rise, admiral. Explain how we will move the entire population of Konoha with this small fleet." The man stood up and gestured at his black yacht, which consisted of one main compartment which housed the helm. "My lord, the boats of the Armada are laden with seals, including one at bow which sucks in water and jets it out from the stems in a high-pressured form. propelling the boat. Another one employs Juken ninjutsu to store anything in a separate dimension. Show me, came another voice aboard the boat, starting the man slightly. It was the shadow clone of the prince. The admiral nodded and formed the seal, and a seal appeared on the deck. I see, it's a modified storage skill that taps into another dimension instead of just a seal. A circular opening materialized, exposing the larger space inside the appeared extended for miles in a hull direction. It was filled with slabs for rocks for chairs, much like a waiting room, except that it was the size of a town. This is one of a few vessels in the Armada fitted with such a seal. We use this for rescue and evacuation operations. The other boats that transport troops, like the force escorts we have today, have dimensions that are so much smaller size. Ultimately, the aim of it is to possess small and light craft that can traverse the ocean quickly. Alright, that has elevated my concerns. Thank you for your tour, Admiral. You are most welcome, Your Imperial Highness. Hours later, every one of the people, even with all the crew trying their best to hasten the board's process, it was only in the late afternoon that the last family got on board. The admiral signaled for his men to return to their escort vessels, guiding the prince and his entourage onto the deck of his yacht. My prince, may we have your permission to set off? With a nod, the small fleet of 5 left the port, sailing off into the horizon. By the Bay of Uchiha evening, Your Imperial Highness, may I invite you to witness this sight? And the admiral, who was personally helming the boat, the white-haired prince and his consort, went to the front of the deck, just up ahead with a cliff face just jutted out from the waters, and near its foot there were several jagged rocks that looked like they were meant to penetrate the hulls of ships, and it seemed the fleet was heading straight for them. Do not be alarmed, Your Highness. This is merely an illusion barrier to keep any foreign vessels away. While it is solid enough to do just that, a pulse emitted from the seals on board our fleet will enable us to pass through harmlessly. The entry is always a grand thing to witness. Suri resisted the urge to use her Sharingan and was not disappointed, as the magnificent sight that greeted her as well worth it. The wall of the cliff seemed to shimmer like a curtain as the fleet passed right through it. Behind it was a majestic forest, surrounded on both sides by steep hills. The water was crystal clear and one could see various fishes swimming in it. Longevity River, the main water body running through Uchiha, said the captain, the pride evident in his voice. Its source is at the summit of Hukotozan, Mount Polaris, and both are scars to the village and the imperial clan. The resplendent rays of the evening sun bathed the island in a golden glow, illuminating a massive torii grounded in the river that towered over the entrance to the village. Its red wood bore the marks of the kanji Uchiha Gakure on one pillar and the village of Longevity on the other. Immediately behind the gate, the water body widened into a large lake-sized port. The cliffs that had originally enclosed the river opened up into a semicircular ridge that enveloped the front of the village before petering out into smaller hulls. In the distance, clearly see the mountain the admiral was speaking of, with its snow-capped peaks and its crown of clouds. More impressively, the buildings were quite different from Konoha as a whole. They were quite beautiful, with tall skyscrapers and all through the village, the bustling metropolis. It wasn't a village, it was a city. The architecture, scenery, everything was different. It was the Uchiha society. My sincerest apologies, Your Imperial Highness. We would typically have arranged the use of a special waterway meant only for the Imperial clan to travel between Imperial Palace and the harbor, but regrettingly, we were unable to do so this time as we have all the citizens of Konagakure on board. Naruto waved a hand seal in dismissal. It's fine, we will travel on foot to the palace. Oh no, my prince, I believe Imperial Household Agency has arranged for a special party to escort Your Imperial Highness to the palace. The 5 boats came to a halt on the dock and the soldiers began to set up the gangplanks immediately. The people the admiral had spoken of could be spotted in the midst of the crowd, clearing the path with a couple of horsemen surrounding the carriage. A sudden silence rippled through the townsfolk as they realized what was happening. Most turned to face the new arrivals, so the only people still moving were the 10 young men on horseback, adorned in uniform with red bracelets around their left arm. They were led by an older man wielding what appeared to be a short wooden scepter topped with a pearly white ball, and a multitude of ropes sporting from it like a rooster tail. "Thank you for allowing me to honor for transporting your Imperial Highness," said the Admiral in earnest. "My colleagues from the Kanecho will now take over, while we facilitate the movement of the Konoha citizens." He then genuflected an action copied by his subordinates for the second time that day. The humble subject sense of their Imperial Highness. Sayuri allowed herself to be helped down the gangplank by Yugao as a noble woman should, while Naruto disembarked to meet the party, which abruptly halted their steed and dismounted. The man wielded this scepter, got on his knees, and impressively the horses did too. Every citizen nearby followed suit, before eventually all that were on the port were in the same submissive position. This humble subject, Grand Steward of Konekacho, pays his respect to the Crown Prince and Princess of Uzushio. "Welcome home, your Imperial Highnesses. Everyone, please raise your head and carry on." Naruto shouted, his voice echoing through the respectfully through the port. The people did as they were told, and some began to cheer and whooping in excitement. The Chokan stood up and approached the white-haired prince. "My lord, please aboard the Imperial carriage. Your loyal subjects will bring your Imperial Highnesses to the palace in the Sasho. Regent, seeking your audience." Regent? No one had mentioned anything about the regency in palace at all. The Uzumaki threw Yugao a questioning look, to which she merely bowed her head. It seemed that she too had not heard of such a regent. "My prince, let us not delay. I too wish to know who this person is," said Sayuri as she moved towards the open-air, horse-drawn carriage. Naruto nodded and entered the black carriage before hopping her up. As soon as they sat down, the Chokan tugged on the rein of his horse, kicking it off to a comfortable galloping as the other escorts followed suit. Along the way, the locals who spotted the procession made way and respectfully bowed their heads through some of the flowers, and many simply waved at the imperial couple from their windows. In short, they were given a hero's welcome, even without doing anything. It appeared that the imperial clan was popular in the village, and this regent probably had something to do with it, given that the Maelstrom throne had been unoccupied for 70 years or so. Even now, every now and then, the carriage passed under arches and structures that the Chokan said was a part of metro. Sure, Naruto had heard of steam trains in the capital of Hinokuni, but he never seen anything this fast. They shuttled many passengers and moved at a speed that Uzumaki would say was faster than any horse he'd seen. Unfortunately, the man had said that he wouldn't be able to board the train like commoners, and the usage of the carriage was steeped in tradition and was the only form of transportation dignified enough for the imperial clan. At the back of Naruto's mind, he knew that he should have expected this lack of freedom. Sayuri had already told him about such life in the spotlight and it wasn't pretty. Nonetheless, he had a plan in mind to explore the village and to do whatever he wanted, just to kick it up a notch. After a turn of events in a public park, they came to a large plaza that was mostly empty, with only guards palace, donning the same red bombarded stationed along the perimeter. Each one knelt down as the carriage came into their field of vision. Before two opened the central doors to the imperial palace gate, a giant granite gatehouse at the other end of the plaza. The three sets of doors themselves were red, just like the border marker, but these had elaborated golden trimming, and the top of the gate bore all the hallmarks of traditional architecture. A prominent signboard above the larger central gateway was engraved with the kanji Gate of Empyrean Light, marking this to be the southern and main gate of the palace. The Makaido possessed a veranda that seemed to be meant for the imperial family to address the public. Extending from it were white stone walls on either side. The perimeter of the castle walls and the plaza were separated by a moat of water diverted from the Chokawa. Finally, the carriage pulled into the main palace grounds, coming to a stop right before the state function hall. "The Imperial Highnesses, the Crown Prince and Princess of Uzushio has arrived," declared the Chokan as he approached the open doors of the halls. The figure inside stood up, walking towards to meet them with a party of her own retainers. Instantly, Naruto was struck by a sense of formality. "Your Imperial Highness, this is Princess Regent of the Uzushio," the Chokan introduced. Her Imperial Highness was formerly Princess of the Outer Court. "Grand Steward, you are dismissed," said the red-haired regent, cutting him off with a raise of her hand. "As you wish, your Imperial Highness. Your humble subject will leave as he was." She pushed up her glasses to seize him up. Reaching out with her chakra sensory technique, only to find that he too had been inspecting her chakra with a pulse of his own. Karin? As this is where I'm going to be leaving this part of, guys. I hope you like this one, and if you do, please leave a like and subscribe to my channel. As this is Apollo Uchiha and I'm signing out. Peace.